So a few weeks ago, I was at this estate sale and I saw this quilt folded up on a table, and it was folded so the front was inside, which I'm sure you'll see why in a few minutes. And the back was really pretty, and I thought at first it was just fabric until I opened it up. It was $2, and I just could not abandon this quilt, even though it's in really, really rough shape. So I'm calling this quilt the Tattered quilt because it is in fact very tattered. It's one of those quilts that I would call a cutter quilt. Even though I hate the idea of cutting up any quilts, this definitely needs to be saved in some capacity, and I don't think it can be repaired. There's too much damage. I hope to make an upcoming video on how I'm going to use some parts of this because again, I just can't not use some of it. But before we really get started looking at this quilt, my name is Chris O'Neill from Sew the Distance. Thank you for joining me today for this episode of Lessons from an Old Quilt. So this beauty is a trip around the world pattern, and we've seen that before. I've shown some other trip around the world quilts that I've had in my collection. It measures 78 inches by 78 inches, so it's a nice square quilt, nice size too, and it's just incredible. So let's take a closer look at this cool quilt. Oh, this poor, poor quilt. I feel so bad for this quilt. What I think happened is somebody washed it and just made the problem worse. So let's take a look at it anyways, even though it is a sad sight to see. So it is the trip around the world. We see that it goes around in circles, the prints. And again, this is set on point, meaning that it's set on the diagonal. It was pieced like this. Okay, so it was pieced on the straight way, okay, and it was hand pieced, and then it was set on the diagonal like this, and it gives us this really cool look. So let's first just talk about the fabric choices and then try to overlook the damage for a few minutes, and then we'll talk about exactly what to do with this. So you can see that we have the blues, pinks, greens, and even some reds or darker pinks. But what really sets it apart, just like our last one that we saw with the trip around the world, is this navy. And I think that was really smart of the maker to do that because it does frame this center when it's on point and when it's not on point too. And it gives you, I don't know, it just makes the whole pattern look so much more interesting. And that's traditionally done. That's not something that the maker necessarily came up with, at least I don't think so, on his or her own, but it is something that they would you traditionally see. Another thing that I love, as always, is that the lines are going the same direction. You see that with the plaid, you see it with the stripes, and I think that's so cool when people do that. Let's talk about the wear on this. The center, of course, is very worn. It could have been on the center of the bed, and of course that got the most wear if you jumped on the bed or kids playing on it. It could have been folded, and the folded edges are what got the wear because it was in storage, wherever it might have been. But definitely the middle has more wear. So the edges over here have less wear. Now, can this quilt be repaired? There's a lot of damage, but we can reuse a quilt like this and try to find a repurpose for it, which is what I'm going to do, and just really think about how I can use some of these portions that are not completely destroyed like these. The biggest thing that happened, though, I believe, is this was put into the washing machine and it just made the whole problem worse. So there is batting. You can see it's a cotton batting that's just disintegrated. Same thing with a lot of these fabrics. It's unfortunate, but it's what happened. So each block is 3 inches by 3 inches, and it is hand pieced, and it was hand quilted, and it was hand quilted fairly well. It just, the wear of it and the care of it was the problem. So if we look at the borders, they were this navy blue, or actually it was more like a periwinkle blue, but it definitely ties together because we see this periwinkle blue here and then it comes over here. But this hand quilting of this rope is so pretty and so nicely done. You can even see some of the markings where it was hand quilted and where the maker had marked it to hand quilt. I love that, especially considering how bad it has worn to have those marks on there still. I think that's so cool. Something else that's very interesting is that the border was machine pieced on. So even though the pieces in the trip around the world pattern were hand done, this was machine done. This was added. So was it added later? Maybe the maker decided that that was too big of a project to do by hand. I don't know what happened. I can't imagine that because, I mean, these little squares would be a bigger project in my opinion. But either way, it was put on by machine. So, and it's in rough shape too. You can see down here how bad it's just come apart. But let's take a look at the back. The back is really cool, and the fabric on the back is really nice. I like it a lot. So let's turn it over. Okay. So this was seamed together, and you can see that here down the middle. And I know it's a very busy print, which is a really great idea for a quilt, because putting a busy print will disguise some of these seams that we might have to put on if we don't, say, use an extra wide backing or something like that. So using that busy print not only helps with disguising some of the quilting, which can or can't be a problem. I mean, if you're great at quilting, you might not want to hide it, but if you're new to quilting, you might want to, you know, have something that would disguise it a little bit. And that's what this does, but it also disguises those seams when you have to put a backing together, because it took me a little bit, even though it's quite obvious to me now where the seam is. You can see the flowers are broken a little here, but it did take me a little bit to find that seam. And I wanted to see how it was put together. So that was really interesting. But this flower print is so pretty, and it goes well with the front, with the pinks and the blues. So I think there was a lot of thought put into this. I can just imagine the maker looking for that perfect fabric. Granted, fabrics weren't as readily available and the choices weren't as readily available, but hey, you know, this maker did a really great job in finding exactly what was needed for the backing of this. Now the binding was just brought around to the front, which we see a lot, and it was stitched down. Now some of the stitches aren't great, and it also looks like it might have been repaired at some point, but that's how it was brought around. You know, let me know what you think about this quilt, because I do want to save it in some way. I'm not sure exactly what to do, but I also don't think I can fix all of the damage that's on the front. I think it's too extensive. So anyway, let me know what you think, and I hope you enjoyed this. So let's talk about the lessons we can learn from this quilt. I think the most glaring lesson that we can learn is that if you find an antique quilt and it's in good shape but might have some holes, don't wash it. I do think that's what happened with this quilt. I think that maybe somebody found it maybe in an attic, or maybe somebody passed away and they inherited it and they decided to wash it. Before you wash it in a traditional washing machine, make sure you secure the fabrics in some way, because a modern day washing machine will just tear this to shreds, and I do think that's what happened. There's some evidence of that in this. So if you do come across one, wash it in your bathtub, hand wash it, even though it's a pain in the neck, but definitely don't use a modern washing machine until you can really get it repaired in some way. The next lesson I think is important to take away from this is that even though a quilt might be tattered, there's still uses. We can make it into pillows, or even those really cute stockings, which I think is what I'm going to do with this one. You know, or tote bags. There's so many things that you can use these old quilts for to give them new life, because I mean, they're just a treasure, and who, you know, nobody wants to actually throw out, or at least I don't know of anybody, and I know I don't want to throw out a quilt, especially as a maker myself. I know how much time, energy, money, and just planning went into this project. It deserves to be saved. So rescue those old quilts and make sure you care for them well. Next, those quilting lines in the border. I mean, come on, isn't that cool with the rope? I love a good rope quilting in a border. It just, with that white thread, it just makes it and just pulls it all together. Even the color, that periwinkle, just pulls it all together. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lessons from an Old Quilt, and I am so happy to share this wonderful tattered quilt with you. If you like what you see, please consider subscribing, giving me that thumbs up, and even commenting below. If you want to know when I have new videos going live, click on that bell button and it will alert you when a new video goes up. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Make sure you take some time to sew. Bye.